it's one thing to create your own like AI people with their own identity, I guess, but to actually take an already existing human being and use their body, use their voice, because I'm sure these AIs could also replicate their speaking voice, and then use that to actually create a film like that. There should be a protection against that. That's terrible. I mean, imagine like what could go wrong. Like imagine all the nudes, like, you know what I mean? Like the celebrity nudes that are going to get out that aren't actually real celebrity nudes, and the fake news type of stuff too as well. Like imagine like in politics, like what they could get the other opponent to say just by using AI. That's just crazy. So yeah, there should and that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the podcast. It's like we don't know how AI is going to change, but there definitely needs to be rules and laws taking place now before it gets there, before it gets to that point, because it's already getting to that point. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Pranzata Podcast. This is your host, Andrea Pranzatelli. This is episode number 97 on my podcast series on YouTube. Before we get into it, if you are new to this channel and you like what you hear today, please don't forget to hit subscribe. It is my mission to grow this channel this year, and your support would be incredibly helpful. I have another guest today. This is Tracy. She is a good friend of mine. She has been on my podcast before, so this is her returning on the podcast virtually. Just to introduce who Tracy is, she is a New York City-based filmmaker, and she is also a YouTuber. She has a YouTube called Nerdy Film Girl. Her YouTube is phenomenal, and I'm watching the growth every single day. It's incredible to see how much it's growing. So if you are a film nerd, her YouTube channel is the one for you. And that's it. So Tracy, my first question for you, and I think this is a really exciting time to have you on the podcast because apparently there's a lot going on right now with the writer's strike. So that's going to be my first question for you today, because I've been sort of hearing about this, but myself, who is not so much involved with film, I sort of hear things, but I'm not so involved with it. Can you tell me in your words, what is the writer's strike that happened in 2023? What caused it? What is it about? And why did it just end yesterday?
Yes, I'm glad you brought this up because I find that there's a lot of misinformation online. I think a lot of people who maybe feel disenfranchised by the superhero blockbuster films, they think that this strike doesn't matter and they can just replace people, that write better films. Just because we've gotten a few bad apples with these, big blockbusters doesn't mean those are the only writers in the guild. And, any TV show you like that, The Bear or anything that's even maybe more indie, this is to protect the writers from AI and also for streaming residuals, because in the era of cable, after 5 years of a sitcom or a series being on television, you would get residual checks. And streaming kind of changed all of that. I know Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad, I know he's an actor, so this has to do with the actor strike, but it's very similar. Aaron Paul tweeted the fact that when Netflix just started to show Breaking Bad, because it used to be on AMC on cable, and then it was that I watched Breaking Bad on Netflix. That was the way I experienced it. He didn't get any money from that. Like no one got money from Netflix from Breaking Bad, and that was one of the biggest shows ever on Netflix. Mm-hmm. So it's things like that, and then of course with AI, that's really the biggest issue right now too. So it's really just preventative measures so that writers are protected for the next 25 years, at least,
So just to clarify, because I'm kind of absorbing all this, not knowing much about it, the protection against AI, is that to protect their jobs from being replaced from AI, or specifically to protect the amount of pay that they're getting, or both?
It's both. Yeah. So, yes, to protect the jobs. You probably can't write a film solely using AI currently, but we're getting really close to that. But when does humanity really get shown? When it's just AI kind of faking it. So you have some brilliant writers that feel that their jobs will become obsolete. And I can see both sides of the coin. Yeah, like why would I need to hire a writer if I can just tell a computer to write a movie? But I think that there's something about the human experience that is crucial to screenwriting. And that's what their biggest concern is.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like the AI and the emergence of AI is affecting so many different people right now. I think right now we're in a state of it's clear that AI is going to become better and bigger and stronger. We just have no idea in which ways that is going to happen. This is like a bigger conversation for another time. I want to stick specifically to more film questions, but just like side tangent really quick. There's so many different opinions out there about AI. Is it going to be better for society? Is it going to be worse for society? There's like so much to get into there. I guess probably a mix of both. And I think the conversations we're having right now are very important because I think having these conversations now are going to move things in the direction that they potentially need to go into to protect AI from making society something bad or making society worse. I think it could go either way. Like I think AI could be a very beneficial thing for society. Like, for example, there's just little things that, like I'm Ubering right now. Okay. That's not something I could have been able to do, without my cell phone. So it's like, okay, in some ways, I'm very grateful for artificial intelligence or the smartphone and everything like that. But as things progress and get bigger and better with AI, there's just like so much there's so much unknown territory that we have no idea what we're getting ourselves into. You know what I mean?
I agree with you. I think it's utilizing it in a way that helps us get the work done more efficiently. If you want to write a film and you want to use AI to do the outlining of things like that, or even if you want to use AI to help block something out and you're a little caught with something, you can make things happen more efficiently in a lot of ways using AI. But if we're talking about completely replacing the human brain for writing, then I think that's when it causes problems. But I agree with you. I'm not like terrified of AI or anything like that.
Yeah. So also to ask more about the writer strike, you were saying earlier today, you're like the writer strike just suddenly stopped. Can you explain more about that as well?
Yes. This past weekend, they were in negotiations and they kind of came to an agreement. I believe it was either early yesterday or last evening, it was announced. It still says tentative just because legally, like the paperwork hasn't been signed on this deal. But everyone is assuming at this point that it is over. I mean, no one's going to be picketing anymore as far as that's concerned. The actor strike is still going to continue, but because the writer strike seems to have come to an end and everyone seems to be really happy on both sides, that means that the actors strike should be ending, I would say, in the next month or 6 weeks. It'll end sooner than later.
Are there fears of AI replacing actors? Is that a thing too?
Oh yes, big time. The one time I see it happening currently, which makes sense to me, is for someone like Paul Rudd as Ant-Man. I like using this example because if you play a character like that, you become an iconic pop culture IP. And so they could take Paul Rudd as Ant-Man and put him in any type of superhero movie they want at that point if they want him to show up in the future or like show it for 2 seconds. I understand that. And I'm sure he got paid something for that. The thing is you can in the future just scan someone, like let's take I don't know, any actor you like. Let's just take Leonardo DiCaprio for 5 seconds. We body scan Leonardo DiCaprio, and then we can just have a fake an AI written film and have the words come out of Leonardo DiCaprio's mouth and he never was there. You know what I mean?
They can just take the image. They could take the image of these actors and they could it's one, I mean, I'm not agreeing with anything, disagreeing either way. It's one, but just like side note, it's one thing to create your own like AI people with their own identity, I guess, but to actually take an already existing human being and use their body, use their voice, because I'm sure these AIs could also replicate their speaking voice, and then use that to actually create a film like that. There should be a protection against that. That's terrible. I mean, imagine like what could go wrong. Like imagine all the nudes, like, you know what I mean? Like the celebrity nudes that are going to get out that aren't actually real celebrity nudes, and the fake news type of stuff too as well. Like imagine like in politics, like what they could get the other opponent to say just by using AI. That's just crazy. So yeah, there should and that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the podcast. It's like we don't know how AI is going to change, but there definitely needs to be rules and laws taking place now before it gets there, before it gets to that point, because it's already getting to that point, I think,
I agree with you. The scary thing that you were bringing up is, and I don't even think this goes just to celebrities. I think it's to anyone is revenge porn with an ex-girlfriend that you want to put up with having her do the craziest stuff, and things like that I think are definitely going to be happening in the future, and that stuff scares me.
Like cheating scandals, like against anybody, any person, but there could be like cheating scandals making AI. I caught this person having an affair, and it's like, whoa, that's not even me. What the fuck? I mean, like there could be so much that could go wrong with this. Yeah. Absolutely. And it probably will. Like, you can't erase all the darkness in humanity. So for every positive aspect of technology, there are going to be the evil things that need to be fought as well. It's like inevitable. You can't avoid it, probably,
You can't. And one of the biggest things, the Leonardo DiCaprio thing, that was kind of an example of what could happen in the future if this wasn't solidified sooner than later. Because the biggest thing that they were pushing, which the studios, I can't believe even suggested this, was that if you were an extra, you would come in for like 2 hours, they'd scan your body. But then like if it was a Warner Brothers film, you would then only be able to work with Warner Brothers, and you couldn't be an extra for any other studio. Yeah. And then Warner Brothers also then doesn't need you again, because then they can put your extra as a body in any movie they want to. So then you're like literally cutting out that person's job. And a lot of people are extras because they want to learn about the industry. The best example of that is Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. I believe it was the film Varsity Blues they were extras on, and they just fell in love with filmmaking. And like, you wouldn't get that experience if you're just in a studio for, green screen studio for 2 hours getting a body scan, and then you can't work for another studio ever again the rest of your life because they own you.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. I'm glad I asked you that question, because I have heard briefly here and there about the writer strike, and I wasn't sure what it was. I know in the comedy world, I've asked a lot of my comedian friends if they are afraid of AI taking over. And so far, I've had pretty positive responses as far as them not fearing that. They're like, you just can't replace a human telling a joke. Like, I mean, unless they could, unless eventually that's a possibility as well. But I mean, stand up is like a very human experience. Like, it's really hard to replicate that. You know what I mean? Film, I could totally see it, because it's like film is like kind of a fantasy world, period. So, there's a lot you could do there to create drama and fantasy, and especially with like superhero villain type things, like all that is fantasy anyway. So I could see a lot of that going wrong. But I feel like stand-up comedy is like one of the fields right now that I feel don't feel afraid of that. It could just be that they're unaware of like what could go wrong, but it feels pretty hopeful with stand-up comedy. Okay, my next question for you, transitioning from this subject, do you personally fear AI taking over your job as a YouTuber or a filmmaker? Do you personally have any of these fears? What are your thoughts and feelings about that?
I mean, I feel a lot better with the film industry knowing that people have really fought back with these strikes, because, I think that shows that there's less to fear moving forward for any young aspiring writers, directors, things like that. I would say for YouTube, the thing that pisses me off is when I click on a video and I know going into it, like as soon as I started, that it was created by AI, and it just feels weird and cold, and I just can't stand it. So, I mean, and then like, you see that they get like 2 million views, and it's like, but this was a stupid AI video, you know what I mean? But
sometimes if I look up, I use YouTube for everything. Like, it's literally like my personal god or therapist. Like, any question I have, I'll ask it. And I have seen some of these videos where it's like a robot reading advice to you, and I can't ever listen to it. I'm like, no, I want to hear a human being giving me advice. I don't want to hear this like robot reading this script. But what's scary is that eventually the robots could get better at sounding more human when they're giving those, advice tutorials and those types of things.
They could. And there's a really popular format on YouTube for reviewers where they don't show their faces, but they'll have a really well-written script, and then they'll read it in an eloquent way, but it'll just be like clips from the movie over it. And these go on for 17, 20 minutes. I've seen even hour videos like this. I'm different. I like to be in front of the camera and just kind of talk a little bit more freely. Like, I have notes, but I don't have like full written scripts. And this is nothing to knock them, but the future of AI, I think, could affect those YouTubers quite significantly, because anyone could then have a script just to tell ChatGPT to write a review or saying that they did like it or they didn't like it, and then have an automated voice say it and it sounds like a person. And I think that there would be such an oversaturated market for that type of YouTuber in the future with that.
Yeah. You and I were talking about this a couple months ago in regards to like women's beauty. It's also interesting to see how AI technology has affected the way women present themselves in public. So many women now are doing so many procedures to their face to get them to essentially look like these filters in real life. And I see it more and more. Not knocking Botox. I've gotten it before. And, you and I have talked about that, there's certain things, but there is like an extent in which the beauty industry, like I go out in public, especially in more wealthy areas where people could afford this type of stuff. And I'm like, why is every woman's face looking exactly the same? Like every woman is getting these like lip injections and like, but I get Botox, but not to like a degree where it's like I look plastic. I kind of keep it natural, or like the fake this, the fake that. And it's like, all the power to people to feel beautiful and stuff. But I feel like it's gone past a point where everybody's starting to look the same. It's almost like AI has made it like uncool to be human. You know what I mean?
I agree with you. I would say the thing that I can't stand the overfilling. Like I understand when people get filler, but like the chipmunk cheeks, I can't stand. Yeah. And the lips that are so big, it looks ridiculous. And the thing is, though, a lot of that happens. Like a lot of times these women don't even know that they look like that anymore because they become addicted to feeling that way after each time they get a treatment done. Yeah. And like the way they see themselves in the mirror is associated with that like boosting high of endorphins of like, oh, I'm perfecting myself a little bit more. They don't see sometimes how over the top they look.
To me, it's like we were saying before, it's not like I enjoy some of these tools myself, but to me, I want to use it to enhance my natural self. Yeah. Like I'm like, all right, a little Botox because I'm getting older and I want to like preserve a little bit, but I don't want to get to the point where I use filler to actually change my face shape. That's to me where it's getting weird, where it's like all these women, they don't have their own unique identity anymore. They're starting to all become like identical, like, you know what I mean? Like there's this identical look, which is interesting. You know what I mean? I do think that is a extension of AI. I really do, because the filters make you look a certain way. And then certain images get a lot of likes and a lot of views on Instagram. And then a lot of women are like, okay, well, people are liking that. I want that. You know what I mean? So it's kind of making this like uniform, almost alien look amongst
women, There's no individualism anymore. I think it's the AI, and I actually think, believe it or not, I think the Kardashians have had one of the biggest influences over it because everyone just tries to look like them. Yeah. They've set the standard kind of what people think they should look like. And they've all had tons and tons and tons of work done. If you ever see photos of the Kardashians before they did anything, they look like completely different people. But they have set the kind of like current standards, which kind of goes with that AI filter look. Yeah,
which is like a shame, because if you struggle with finances, which I do, you feel like, I can't be pretty because I'm poor. Like, you know what I mean? Like, right. Because it costs so much money to do all those things they did. But I don't know, personally, I kind of am in a way happy that I couldn't afford all those things, because it kind of taught me to be okay with imperfections. And I kind of want to make imperfections cool. Like, you know what I mean? I want to make being a human being with imperfections like cool again,
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Anyways, okay, so moving on. Next question. Ooh, okay. I feel like we're having some heavy topics today, but this is good. I like talking about this stuff. The next question is, do you think it is too difficult or too overwhelming of a pursuit to be a long filmmaker today? Because I feel like everything now is so focused on the short form content. So let's say you're somebody who's like, I have a dream of having a major film. Do you think that's outdated, or no? People who want to make large films should totally go for that.
I think they should absolutely go for it, because if anything, if the box office is any indication of that, Oppenheimer was a 3-hour film and that's about to make $1 billion. So I think that yes, we are addicted to like the short form, type of content. But I think there is still something that says about films that feel like an event. Scorsese's newest film, Killers of the Flower Moon, which is coming out, I believe, in November. That's I just saw it was 3 hours and 3.5 hours or 3 hours and 40 minutes. Like, granted, these are really long films, but I think if that's like the super end of the spectrum there, and they're very successful. I think long term, we're going to be okay with that.
Yeah, I always wondered that because I feel a lot of like it must be really challenging as a young filmmaker to like, if you have this dream of pursuing big film, it's almost like I would imagine you kind of have to attack it at both angles, maybe like keep the long form film as a goal, but in the meantime like play the game of shorts like to get there or something like that, you know?
Yeah. And there was nothing wrong with an hour-and-a-half movie. That used to be the standard. And like, I've seen quite a few filmmakers doing hour-and-a-half films recently, and the pacing's really good. And it actually felt longer in a good way. Like, it was very well developed on all sides of it. And it was great. Like, I think the length to me doesn't matter if it's telling the story in the right way. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Okay, that's good. Because sometimes I even wonder myself, I'm like, I'm a podcaster. Like, am I wasting my time? But no, there are so many. There still is a desire for people to want to hear long conversations. You could also clip up podcasts and make smaller segments as well for the people.
Yeah, you're really good at that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I know. I love doing the long form, but then I also try to like, the one thing I hate though is doing shorts. I don't know about you. I hate making YouTube shorts because you spend so much time on something that's like 20 seconds long. And it's like, this isn't but again, that's like kind of what I was talking about. It's like, I want to focus on the long form content of podcasting, but I unfortunately have to like play the game a little bit in between. I would like to afford a editor, like a video editor, to do those things for me that I don't like. So that's going to be a goal of mine in the near future. All right, next question. So I started including a trivia section of my podcast. So I prepared three pop quiz trivia questions for you about film. So this is the now we're really I almost feel bad putting this on you because I'm like, this is the nerdy film girl. Now we're about to see how nerdy you really are.
Okay.
Okay, but don't feel bad if you don't get them.
Okay.
And listeners too, this is like fun for them because they can kind of like guess while they're listening. Okay, first question. In what country were the Lord of the Rings movies filmed?
New Zealand, I believe.
Got it. That's it. New Zealand, everybody. So ding, ding, she got it. So far, she passes the nerdy film girl standard. Okay.
Can I hire you to be a movie trivia MC on my channel? We'll do a stream. We'll get like 6 people on, and you can be the host.
I would love to. Here's the thing. I didn't know any of these answers. I just like Googled things and like found things that I thought were interesting.
Oh, that'd
so
be fun.
I have no right to quiz anybody.
We'll be in discussion about this in the future.
Yeah. Okay, question number 2. Okay. What item is seen in pretty much, I don't know if every single scene, if not most scenes in Fight Club. So let me repeat the question. In Fight Club, there is an item shown in almost every single scene, if not every single scene. What is that item?
I feel like I definitely know this, and now I'm oh man, everyone on this that's listening is gonna call. I think they're all gonna know it, and I'm blanking out on it. I don't know.
Apparently, and again, I didn't know this, but I found it today. A Starbucks cup. Is that true?
Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense.
I'm not sure why or if there's a particular symbolism behind that, but I looked at a couple different sources today. I'm like, let me double fact check this and make sure this is correct. But I looked at several different sources, and apparently there was a Starbucks cup in pretty much every single scene of Fight Club.
That's cool. I love David Fincher, and he has a new film coming out with Michael Fassbender called The Killer. He's such a genius, and I that makes a lot of sense now that you said that. I got to rewatch it. It's been a bit since I've seen Fight Club.
I wonder if there's like a symbolism behind that, or if it's just like really great advertising from Starbucks.
Definitely probably has to do with his mental state, but I'd have to do a little bit of a deep dive about that.
Yeah,
and
maybe
a
you
rewatch.
could save it for one of your nerdy film girl episodes. Talk about
yes.
it. Okay, one more question for you. This one was interesting to me because it has to do with comedy as well, sort of. Who originally was supposed to be the voice for Shrek?
Oh, and that was from SNL, Chris Farley.
Yes. So apparently Chris Farley was the original one, and he already, if I'm not mistaken, from what I read today, he already did a certain percentage of the film and then he died. So somebody had to take over.
Yeah, and it's weird because Chris Farley, I don't think was doing a Scottish accent. So when Mike Myers started doing it with the Scottish, I mean, it's so weird to think of Shrek not sounding like Mike Myers now, you know?
Yeah. I have to, did they include any of Chris Farley's original voice
I don't
in
think
it?
so. No, I wonder if you could probably find it on YouTube maybe if they have the recordings. That would be very interesting.
I was just talking about this with one of my other guests from a couple episodes ago, but I'll bring it up again because it's relevant. I've been watching South Park lately, and I'm going through all the seasons just like quickly. Um, I noticed Cartman, his voice drastically changed in one of the seasons, but then it kind of started to go back to normal later on. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, he had this like really powerful like voice that you can't forget. And then they calmed it down. And I'm like, why would they do that? And from the perspective of a singer, I'm thinking maybe he had a vocal injury. So I looked into it, and that was what happened. He had some sort of like vocal injury. So the way he was doing Cartman's voice, he had to tone it down. But then later in the season, it kind of like got back to normal. So maybe he recovered or something. But that was like crazy to me. I was like, damn, that's something that actors have to deal with, is vocal injuries.
Oh yeah, it's like Marge Simpson, I think, tends to sound more and more vocally fried as the seasons go on because she's got that such raspy like voice, and I don't, it can take a toll on your vocal cords for sure.
Yeah, that's something I have to deal with because I teach, I podcast, I sing. So I've almost had to like learn. I'm like doing it right now that I'm talking. I've had to learn how to quiet my voice down because I use it so much that I don't want to wear it out. I feel like you have like such a soothing, gentle voice. Like that's not, I feel like you would never have a vocal injury because you have such like this calming, like grounded voice. Like I'm jealous of you.
My goodness.
In a good way, a good jealous. I'm like neurotic, so my voice is so loud. Okay. All right. Number 5 question. Ooh, I like this question. What is a film that really touched you or impact you in a major way? And if so, why or how?
Like something recently or of all time?
It could be recently. It could be like your favorite of all time. It doesn't have to, it could be either or.
I'll just go with recent because I always give the same answer for it's for like what movie like got me into filmmaking, which is American Beauty. But I'm not going to go into that because I feel like I probably already answered this on your last podcast. So I would say there's actually 2 films recently that had a really strong impact on me. One is an A24 film called Past Lives. The storytelling was just absolutely incredible, and I think that even if I think everyone can relate to it. It's in not just a loss of, not only in like a what if scenario, but even just grieving people that you were in the past, of like saying goodbye to those versions of yourself because they don't exist anymore. And I just think it's one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen, and it's definitely going to get Oscar nominations. So if anyone is interested, Past Lives, I absolutely recommend it. And then recently, actually last night, I saw a film called Cinema Paradiso, which is an Italian film from the 80s, and it had always been on one of those lists of like, oh, you have to see it. And I absolutely did not expect the ending to go that way, and it was such a love letter to film, and it really touched me. I love films that are love letters to films because it's it really shows like some people don't get how important they are, and I think that there's so much that you can learn just from watching a movie.
Yeah, no, I've started, as we were talking about when I was on your podcast recently, I started watching a lot more films this year, and I started to feel this way, like exactly what you said. Like film, when done very artfully and done well, it could have the power to make you think about like deeper questions and issues with society, issues with humanity, issues with yourself. Like it really gets you thinking,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I would imagine someone like you who's watching films all the time, you probably get to have these kind of like mental conversations with yourself all the time, which is good.
Yeah, it helps because sometimes even when I wasn't in a relationship, I used to never have a problem going to the movies by myself, to the theater, and I actually really enjoyed it. But the thing I hated about that was I always wanted to talk to someone about the film afterwards. And so that was kind of like, I'd have to just like text people. So now that I'm in a relationship with someone that loves movies just as I do, that's kind of a good benefit to that.
Yeah, that's it. I feel like you belong with somebody who also likes film, because that would be really hard for you if like you had all this like burst of, oh my God, I have to share this with you. And the person you could, let's just put it this way. If I was, if you were dating me, you would hate me. Like, or maybe the other way around. Like maybe I would be open to learning. So actually it could go either way. Either you'd be like, this bitch is so dumb, like I can't relate to her. Or you might be like, oh my God, I'm so excited to teach her. It would be like one or the other, but I'm not sure.
I mean, it's not like you don't ever watch movies. Like there are some people that they'll just say like, oh, I don't watch movies. And I'm like, yes, you do. Like, you might think like, oh, you're not a movie person, but like there's definitely, if it's a comedy or even like a chick flick or whatever, like you've seen movies. You know what I mean?
I have met people that genuinely don't like music, or they're like, it's okay in the background, but I never, like, I don't care what's there. I'm like, all right, we would have nothing in common. Like that would be really, I couldn't date a person like that. You know what I mean? I have some really good friends like that too. Like I have like one of my guy friends in particular, shout out to David. He like said, I'm not a music person. I don't get it, but it's some people are genuinely like that they're like, whatever's on the radio in the background is good for me. And like, they don't really have a preference. So I just find that interesting. All right. So I have some more questions for Tracy. I want to take a little quick announcement. So for those of you who are enjoying the podcast so far, I just want to ask you if you could please hit subscribe. I'm trying to grow my channel this year to the point where it's being monetized. I really want to upgrade the quality of the podcast. I want better equipment. I want a fact checker. I want to hire a team, video editors. So your support would be incredibly helpful. Also, I have a link in the section below with my Venmo. Any donations to help support the podcast are greatly appreciated. Even if it's $1.50, like don't think it's got to be something grand. Even tiny contributions really mean a lot to me. So I just wanted to throw that in there. And lastly, if anything we've talked about today is interesting to you, please chime in the conversation below. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about any of these things. Like, what's your favorite film? What do you think about the writer's strike? All that. All right. So continuing. My next question for you, young filmmakers, new filmmakers, what are some common mistakes that you have seen young filmmakers make, or yourself? Like, what are some common mistakes you've seen yourself make in film that you're like, damn, I wish I knew that,
Not having a continuity person. There have been so many times, and like if you get into like a professional set, there's always someone that's their job to make sure that everything looks exactly the same and nothing's on set that doesn't need to be there. But there have been so many times that like, because I do pretty much everything myself with just like a little bit of help. I don't really have like a big crew. And a lot of times I won't catch something that's in the frame. And these are always just for personal projects. Like if it's like a commercial project, then obviously I'll be way more on top of it. But I think because of like passion projects, I feel like I get a lot more so hyper focused that I don't pay attention to certain things. And that's normal, but normally you have people on set that are like, oh, there's a Starbucks cup in the fucking background. You know what I mean? So that doesn't happen a lot to me anymore, but it used to happen to me a lot when I was a lot younger.
You'd be like, damn it, I had such a great shot and there's a fucking like stuffed animal platypus in the back, like, or something.
Yes,
like that.
Or mirrors in the background, or mirrors, and you don't see that you can see my, like there was one I did such a long time ago, and you can see me in the corner of the mirror because it was reflecting me filming.
Oh, and like it has the camera and it looks corny.
Yeah, awful.
That's funny you mentioned that. That reminds me of something Whitney Cummings talked about. So Whitney Cummings is a stand-up comedian, but she's also like a film producer. She produced Movie Buff, you might know.
Did it just come out or recent?
Well, actually, it was a TV show, Two Broke Girls.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like Two Broke Girls, I think. But she was talking on her podcast recently about how everybody on the team would criticize her for being overbearing, like perfectionist, like because she would be like looking for things in the background and they're like, dude, chill out, you're too overwhelming. And then there was like one particular scene where everybody was like, calm down, it's fine. And then in the scene there was like some guy in his pajamas in the background or something, and they had to pay like a ridiculous amount of money to get it moved. It was like a couple $1,000s. And she was like, see, like she's like, everybody calls me crazy, but like, look, now we had to drop $2,000 to get some guy in his PJs removed or like something like that.
Yeah. So. No, it can be a headache. At least now technology helps with like certain things like that, but you do have to spend a lot of time removing things from a frame.
Is that something you know how to do personally? Like if there's something in the frame, you know how to remove it?
I'm very not the best. I've done things in the past where I've like covered an air conditioner with like the curtain that was next to it. I had to do that for a video once, but if I have to do something like that, then I'll definitely turn to a friend that's like really knowledgeable with like After Effects and you know, stuff like that.
What's like a great starter video editing software for someone who's just starting out?
Um You know, I think I don't use this, but I've heard it's incredible, and it's DaVinci. That I think has a free version that is like essentially all you need. I use Adobe Premiere, but that is because I have the whole cloud, and I do like it's a subscription, so you pay for it every month, which can add up. But I'm just so used to it. I used to use Final Cut Pro a long time ago, and then when they switched to the non-timeline format, I just didn't gravitate towards that style, so that's why I went to Adobe Premiere. But I mean, I'm sure you can even do stuff on iMovie. And actually, all the young kids that are on YouTube, they all edit on their phones. I don't know how they do it, but I have to.
That
do
would
it on
drive me crazy. That would
crazy.
I also use Adobe, but I don't use Premiere Pro. I feel like Premiere Pro is like the good shit. I use Premiere Rush, which is like the idiots version. Like it's like Premiere Rush. It's literally like exactly what it says, like Rush. So like there's certain things that annoy me about it, like you can't perfect things, but I'm not a filmmaker, like I'm not a video editor. That's not my specialty. I'm just a podcaster. So I just do that as a way to make it easier for me. But again, like that's something I want to do in the future. Is my goal is once I hit 1,000 subs and it starts getting monetized, even if it's a small amount of monetization, I want to hire a film editor for my podcast. That would be my goal, you know.
No, that's great. Is the Adobe Rush part of a subscription as well, or is that a one-time fee?
It's a subscription. I think it might be cheaper than what you pay. I think Adobe Rush is like $50 a month or something like that. I mean, it adds up, but it's not terrible either.
That's what I pay too. And so I think you are able to get anything from the Premiere suite. So any of the programs. So that can be helpful.
Yeah, maybe I'll like learn how to up my skills a little bit to the Premiere Pro. All right, I have a few more questions for you. I feel like today's going to be sort of a shorter podcast because I have a lot going on this week, but I do have 2 more questions for you. So my next questions are more about you personally and about philosophy. I like to include that for everybody. Okay, for you personally, when it comes to managing negative emotions, are you the type of person who prefers to get your emotions out and talk things out and like deal with them? Or are you somebody who's like, those negative emotions are useless, I'm going to use this time to focus on my goals and just kind of distract myself? Like, what's your there's no right or wrong answer, but like, what's your personal method?
I would say I tend to not focus on the negatives, and I find negativity really motivates me to just overcome what I'm going through. I will say though, I'm not like a robot, and like I am able to tap into my emotions if something's bothering me or things like that, and talk about it. But I would say I really try to just kind of, every day to me is a brand new day, and I love waking up in the morning with that mentality.
Yeah, I feel like I'm somebody who's like, I guess if we're thinking of it in terms of like AI, that's like one of the benefits of AI, I guess, is that the reason why AI is so productive is because they don't have emotions. You know what I mean? I was listening to this on the Lex Friedman podcast. I'm a huge fan, and he had a guest on who specializes in, you know, talking about AI and everything. And he was saying like one of the reasons why these machines are so powerful is because they just complete tasks. Like they don't like, if you tell a robot make this film, they're not like, are my friends gonna like they're just like, there's no negative or positive emotions. If they make a shitty film, there's no negative emotions. If they make a great film, there's no positive emotions. They just fulfill a task. So to be a human being, it's like there's all this stuff that goes with it. And I feel like me personally, I'm very, you could say, unevolved, like, because I'm very emotional and it gets in the way of a lot of things. But at the same time, like, I don't necessarily want to lose all that either. Cause like, I think the emotion is what makes the work more beautiful in a way. You know what I mean? Like the film and the music and everything like that, having some emotional feelings behind it, I think are what make it beautiful. But to manage those emotions, I feel like you do a great job at that, because like I feel like you're somebody who's so even keeled. You know what I mean?
Thank you. Yeah, I would say the one thing that gets in my way is, and a lot of artists, and I'm sure you feel this way too sometimes, is the imposter syndrome. And sometimes I feel like maybe I'm doing something that's a little out of my league, or I get overwhelmed, and then I'll look back at stuff that I made in the past, and I'm like, no, I do know what I'm doing. Like, stop, like, shut the hell up in my head, like things saying I can't do something, because we all can, we all grow.
I usually feel the same exact way about things. I notice whenever I'm doing things in the present, I'm like, this sucks. I'm so nervous. This is bad. Or if I just edit a video, I'm like, what the fuck? That was terrible. But then a year later, I'll look back at it and be like, oh my God, that was awesome. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's only in those, like you said, in those moments that you get kind of like tense and overwhelmed about everything. And then if you kind of like look back at all your history, like, not to say you don't see flaws and things. You're like, oh yeah, at that point I didn't have that skill, but overall, like, look at all that I've accomplished, like with such, like, you know what I mean? Because I feel like, to start out, you usually people starting out, they lack financial resources. They're still learning skills. Like there's a lot going on in the background, like relationships and family and all kinds of stuff. So to like look back and see all you've accomplished while going through all that is really rewarding, to see.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I have one more question for you. To the listeners who listen to all the podcasts, sorry if I've over abused this question. I've asked it probably to the last like 5 guests, but I really truly like this question because I feel like it really brings out always like a unique perspective for me to hear. If you could go back to your younger self, doesn't have to be any particular age, maybe 10 years ago, high school, 20s, whatever. If you could go back to your younger self and give yourself advice that you think would set you up for success today, what would you tell your younger self?
Stop putting time and energy into things that aren't progressing you forward. I know there's a time and a place, and when you're in your teens and 20s, you want to have a lot of fun and things like that. I feel like I didn't really start accomplishing a lot till my mid to late 20s. And a lot of times that was because I was putting so much energy into relationships that weren't progressing my craft forward. So that's definitely what I would say. Putting too much energies into relationships that are kind of not benefiting you in your goals and dreams.
Yeah, 100% agreed with that. And it's funny, I've had another guest who said that. She's like, yeah, looking back, like, and she's shout out to Sarah Tolomash. She was a couple episodes ago. She's a very successful comedian in New York City. And she said she didn't really start progressing as a comedian until she was in her 30s, because all throughout her 20s as a woman, she was like, I need to get married, I need to have kids, I need to have a boyfriend. And she poured so much of herself into the relationships that she wasn't really doing everything she needed to do to pursue comedy. Like, she wasn't living in a city. She was living, in a more suburban area. And so finally she like learned that life lesson, and she just really put her everything into comedy and, went to the city where she could actually make it happen. I feel like as a comedian, you need to be in a city to make that happen, or else it's not possible. So I agree with you 100%. I've heard other women say similar things, and I can say the same thing myself. Is like, it's tough. It's a tough balance, because it's like there's nothing wrong with wanting a relationship. Like it's
right.
it's normal. Like, it's normal to want somebody to love. It's normal to want somebody to share your love of film with after you see a movie. But to spend time and energy to something that just clearly isn't working. Like, I feel like as humans, we have this, like, we've got to make it, like, or else I'm a failure, like, type of attitude. But to be able to like quickly assess something and be like, this isn't working, let's move on. Like, I feel like that's a healthy skill to develop,
Oh, absolutely. It's crucial to end those relationships in your 20s before they become relationships that you're stuck in for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And I'm glad you're in a relationship now that seems to be like fitting you. Like, it seems like
Yes.
he also loves film and you guys work together. So that's great.
Yeah, he's incredibly supportive and also motivates me. So that's great.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. All right. So that's actually all I have for today. It's probably a little bit of a shorter podcast than normal because I have quite a busy week. But regardless of the length, I feel like we touched on some really, in-depth topics today. I'm really glad we talked about these things. So again, for the listeners, if you enjoyed what you heard today, this is Tracy, also known as Nerdy Film Girl. She has an amazing YouTube that is growing successfully every single day. It's so exciting to see. I will include the link to her YouTube below if you guys want to check her out. I will also include the link to her Instagram if you want to check her out there as well, see what she's got going on. And that's it. Pranzata Podcast, episode number 97. Hope you guys have a good night, guys. Bye.